I have a quick favor to ask before we start. I'm not even asking 30 seconds of your time. If you have been enjoying the 90% Healthy podcast, we truly appreciate if you hit subscribe. It genuinely helps us grow and reach more people and keep bringing you thoughtful conversations about health that actually moves the needle without losing your mind. We're really, really grateful that you're here and continue to be. Now let's jump in the episode. Welcome back to the 90% Healthy podcast. I'm your co-host, Klaudia. I've got Don here with me on the other seat, and we've got a third seat that's being filled.
Hey, Klaudia, how are things in South Florida today? Or where are you today?
I'm actually in California.
You're in Cali.
My old stomping ground.
Yeah, and is the weather beautiful?
Here for the week. So nice.
Yeah, that's the thing about Southern Cal is it's tough to beat the weather.
You can't.
So, hey, we're joined today with an old friend of mine. I'm not saying he's old. I'm just saying we've been friends for a long time. And we're here with Dr. Raouf Gharbo. And Dr. Gharbo and I were teammates at Ohio State Wrestling. We go back, and I'll refer to him both as Raouf, Dr. Gharbo, and Ron. Okay, so I retain the ability to use all three names. And Ron, is it your freshman year? Would have been my junior year. I see you walking on campus.
Yes. I had contemplated walking onto I had been invited. I had contemplated walking on the team and was lost at the time.
And so I said, you got to come out. Ron comes on to the team. We were teammates for 2 seasons. He was there for 2 or 3 more. I don't know if you used a redshirt year or not. So there for 3 more, was an All-American at Ohio State, which is an amazing accomplishment, especially back then. We weren't cranking out All-Americans very regularly. So Ron, for a walk-on to make All-American is a great story. It was a story of grit and stick-with-itness. But before we start the interview, I want to spend a little bit of time because one of the stories I love about Ron, he has an older brother, Sam, and his father, Samir Gharbo, was water polo, correct?
Yes.
Was a water polo player for Egypt. And his mother was a speed swimmer for East Germany. And the two of them met at an international meet. This is before the fall of the wall in Berlin. So his mother, Christina, defected from East Germany. They moved to the United States, and that was the beginning of the Gharbo family. I've just always thought that was the coolest story in the world because his parents were just golden. They were great people. I loved every minute I spent with them.
I hit the lottery on my parents. I wish other people who struggle were as fortunate as I am.
Yeah. Well, I want to talk a little bit about that as we go through with maybe generational trauma. I think it's probably worth a little bit of...
that's an episode in and of itself.
There you go.
Sure.
There you go.
Sure. The Soviet school system put the burden on the young German kids. She was 9 when the war ended, and they made the kids feel that you should always remember. You should never forget. But I think the extra step of guilt is difficult.
Yeah.
So we were teammates long time ago. But then in 2015, when I was coming back to work with the wrestling team at Ohio State, I'd already engaged with one of the wrestlers and the head coach, and the head coach talked me into coming back. Well, all of a sudden, out of the blue, Ron Gharbo settles in and says, I'm here to help you. And I don't think I really knew that you were doing a lot of HRV work up until that. But all of a sudden, here's a great teammate who is HRV fluent and made a contribution to the program. He gave us a first beat system, which was a several $1,000 investment, which really gave us the ability to collect some information early. So not only was I in this, I wasn't there by myself. I had the support of a wonderful doctor who really studied this, and it was just an amazing piece to come together with my old teammate and really play a part in the role that we got to play with the team through 18. So that was really cool. And this is when we really started to align because my HRV from a user standpoint was really ramping up, and Ron's background in HRV and understanding autonomic rehabilitation was outstanding, arguably one of the best I've ever met. And it was just a great resource. So Ron, as we get started here today, for a listener, now we talk HRV a lot. buddy. But if we have a listener out here today that doesn't know what HRV is, how do you explain it to your patients?
Two ways to patients and clinicians. I like the term autonomic range. What is your level of activity tolerance? And we have dozens of metrics: VO2 max, tilt tables, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But only in the last 20 years do we have a metric of your restorative sleep. And so one of the problems, cardiology looked at this metric in the 90s, and most cardiologists will say, oh yeah, we looked at that in the 90s as a metric of cardiovascular health. You can't make it what you want to make it is one of the first rules. It is a metric of your recovery capacity, of whole health. It then affects everything downstream. So the rule is it's incredibly sensitive, but terribly specific. You can't make it what you want to make it a metric of unless you are very disciplined, but not just disciplined, but then also have experience as to where are some of the strange numbers. And so people do obsess on the data. People do run down rabbit holes. I put very discrete biomarker instructions to my patients. So you will check this marker for 10 seconds in the morning, and then you will move on. If your number is low 3 nights in a row, you've not done your mitochondrial housekeeping at night.
Ooh.
So you will have a 2-minute conversation with the person who knows you best. Then stop. If you can't figure it out, you move on, you veto, keep paying attention. So it's sensitive, but not specific for a single disorder, unless you want to say whole health. It's specific for whole health and
It's
recovery
that
capacity.
30,000-foot check engine light on the human dashboard.
Yes.
Now, you used a term a minute ago. You talked about the autonomic nervous system, which I refer to as our automatic nervous system. It's the one that runs in the background, makes all our organs work and things like that. But it's also the one that's very stress impacted, particularly in the lifestyle we live today. Ron, Klaudia, if you've ever heard me talk about tigers and paper tigers, Dr. Ron Garbo's the guy that I got that from. And I try to do my best to credit him whenever I say it.
I haven't heard it. I'm just kidding.
Okay. But when we start talking about that autonomic system, Ron, is this a situation? Well, let me take a step back. Do you believe that the advent or this elevation of understanding as it relates to autonomic health, is that a function of wearable technology that we have access to today and the general public has gotten more? And we've drugged the medical community into this space almost. Would you agree with that?
So not the research community. There are these amazing Copenhagen Halter study, Framingham over decades, where they follow hundreds of people over decades, and they use ECG. Incredibly expensive and cumbersome. So the two things that wearable technology and data crunching has been gasoline, and then clinical medicine has lagged. Whereas other aspects, you have performance coaches, you have psychologists who lean into heart rate variability biofeedback, but these 4 different entities haven't communicated well. And the joy I have is connecting dots. Being a rehab doc, I'm not a cardiologist or a neurologist or a pulmonologist or a psychologist, but I know pretty much all of those and can connect dots for people who've known things intuitively. And I can say, well, there's data in this other field you haven't been looking that supports that intuition.
So there's a vast amount of information out there, is what I just heard you say, but we still have not done a good comprehensive job of interlacing this and so we still have a lot of potential to come. Ron, you wrote a paper that was published in Physical Medicine Rehabilitation Clinics of North America called Autonomic Rehabilitation Adapting to Change. In this paper, it discusses wearables, mobile sensing as catalysts for understanding autonomic health. And also in that paper, you discuss a particular point that we call, let me get up here to my notes, autonomic switching, or pulling a couple levers in the autonomic to create a dynamic equilibrium. It's not just balance, but there's an equilibrium. Can you spend a little bit of time talking about that?
Absolutely. This is step one when somebody's getting into it. I say starting out, and nothing's 100%, but starting out, eliminate your use of the word autonomic balance.
Mm.
Balance suggests a linear relationship or a binary relationship, day or night, yes or no, or linear, which is 80-20, 20-80, 60-40. They are two independent levers.
I
And
agree.
again, for the most part, not 100%, HRV metrics are metrics of the parasympathetic system, not linear balance. And so get used to that it's a metric of one of the two levers. The other lever, it's VO2 max, it's heart rate, it's different metrics of the sympathetic fight or flight system. And then say heart rate recovery, the second you stop, is parasympathetic. So
Mhm.
get used to the notion that it is a metric of the parasympathetic system. And because wearables, the wrist is 3 feet, so the first bead and the Holter monitors, they're ECG of the chest. That's electrical signal that's 10 times bigger than any other electrical signal in the body, so it's durable. But out at the wrist, that's 3 feet away. It's a light sensor with movement. So daytime HRV with a light sensor is very suspect, but it
Yeah.
doesn't matter because I want to know the depth, the richness of your sleep recovery and compare it to what you can tolerate. So then the next thing is, so it's a metric of parasympathetic. That's why I like nighttime. And then the next thing is you can have parasympathetic activation or deactivation. But HRV can also go down indirectly, underline indirectly, because of sympathetic activation or deactivation. So you got to always remember, and this is there's one group of people that have exceptionally high HRV and is not a metric of health. People with anorexia, for whatever reason, it's not fully
Really?
understood, they have exceptionally high HRV. And is that due because they're very parasympathetic? Anyway, you just got to remember there are two levers. One is direct and one is indirect. And so and I remember one of our conversations about the difference between recovery and, say, silent courage. One of them is a recovery state. The other is not. If you're
No.
standing up quietly to a bully, that is a very high energy state. And
Yeah.
so you have to be both sympathetically ready to fight or flight, and you have to be calm and parasympathetic. And so I remember the conversation we had about co-engagement of those two levers being flow or
Mhm.
Yeah.
courage, and then which is distinctly different from peace and recovery, which is if you don't have a place to sleep at night that feels safe and is safe, how could you ever be fully parasympathetic? You have to have a locked door or etc.
I actually, sorry, I don't think we have talked about it to that extent. We've talked a lot about flow, having both sympathetic and parasympathetic engaged at the same time, but I haven't seen it referred to as it also is the case for courage. And now that I think about it, it is so true. Like what, not necessarily just perhaps standing up to a bully, but when you've got courage with your partner to say something that or start a difficult conversation, you're nervous, but you're just really concentrated. It's so interesting.
The 5 minutes before you compete.
Yeah.
You should not be wasting energy. Yes, I believe there's a category of emotion. I believe physiology drives much of emotion, and there are buckets of emotion. Like fight, flight, or freeze is sympathetic.
Yeah.
We're going to brawl for 7 minutes on a wrestling mat. But the second the whistle blows, I gotta know that boundary. So one of the first things when I'm working with anybody burning out who has competed at a high level, either academically, physicians that burn out, or physically, I can reassure them all those skills are still there. All I got to get you to is recognize the difference between peace and courage. They are so driven to be ready to be courageous and even calm. They may lose that ability to be calm, but they completely not grasp this concept that, well, I mean, this is what my wrestling career was about. I overthought everything in high school,
Oh my
and I
God.
choked and I choked and I choked. And so I was trying to solve that in college because no one wanted it more. Nobody worked harder. Nobody blah, 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 blah. But I was exhausted by the time it came to compete mentally and physically.
Let
And
me
I
ask
think
you a question about that, Ron, because I know I run into this a lot. There are so many tools out there that you can use to not just measure, but modify these states and people and recording your feelings. How do I feel now? And so there's devices that record this all the time. I'm not a feeling guy. I grew up in a family that you woke up in the morning, if you weren't in a good mood, you got in a good mood. Okay. It was a decision. And I've had that conversation with my daughter, and it's like, okay, make up your mind. Are you going to be in a good, and so we didn't have a choice. But I,
no, you did have
and
a choice. It was you just chose
at
right.
the same time, when I go back, I too struggled with anxiety desperately. In 84, listen, I had 9 losses in 84. 7 of them were in dual meets at home in our home arena. I couldn't lose on the road and I couldn't win at home. And so I started working with a sports psychologist that helped me work on some of these visualization, what we call meditation today, these kinds of things. And we're going on 50 years ago, unfortunately. And I still use those techniques today. So I don't do feeling. I just don't do it.
You can still grow. There's still time.
I know. So it's your ability to switch, I think, is what's so important. And when I think of resiliency, I don't think of how full is my recovery bucket. I think of it as my ability to switch between states and to own my emotions from that, or the impact of that. What are your thoughts there? Do you feel the same way?
Yeah. So I like the word adaptability. I think resilience is a subset of adaptability. Resilience is, can I take more of the same? But we know that overtraining and not getting good sleep, that we have to adapt. So I personally think the ultimate performer has to adapt, and then to be able to shift their physiology on demand, recognizing these states of, say, peace, courage, co-engagement, and fighting or flighting, and recognize what it takes. And so you have 2 independent levers. So I have a very strong opinion. There's an order to this. I personally, you come to me, I'm not going to start off with, thoughts and emotions. I'm going to start with, how do you get your parasympathetic system engaged, and very objective breathing and biofeedback and things like that. Now you're getting good at re-engaging on demand the parasympathetic system. But if you need to lower the sympathetic tone the 3 weeks before an event, and you just stay up here for 3 weeks, that's just not going to work. You have to,
Brutal.
there's still something that happens with the sympathetic tone. So first, it's engage the parasympathetic braking system, recovery system with the breathing, become an expert at that. And then, this is difficult, but then you're going to have to learn how to let go or withdraw the sympathetic nervous system. So you're driving top speed into a curve. You can brake all you want, but you're going to have to let up off the gas some, no matter what. And there is, I think, some more elegant explanation. Honestly, I've spent a lot of time, is how do I get somebody to let go? And the easiest example is, I believe it's through acceptance and of what you can't control. So I'll tell people, get your athlete's best control your controllables quote, or there's nothing better written for the 12-step program than the Serenity Prayer. It's about recognizing what you can and can't control. So for instance, somebody who's been harmed in the past, they're getting triggered by the past. Somebody who's worrying about the future is trying to control your event 3 weeks ahead of time. And so you have to breathe, engage your parasympathetic system, start shifting your emotion. I believe gratitude, there's a lot of data for gratitude, is the doorway emotion, and then you have choices. And so then you accept, I can't control the future and I can't control the past. If I keep getting my physiology right now, think I've already prepared very thorough, I should go to sleep instead of ruminating or worry. And so I'm letting go of the future. So we try and identify what's causing sympathetic tone, accept what you can't control. And then it's not easy, but that's, I promise, a process and not results. And I believe that's the process.
Something that I have seen in the space, and I have been recommended to do so as well, I have a tendency to ruminate at times, especially before going to sleep. And not necessarily like crazy rumination, but it just occurs, like the things I have to do, And then I'm the kind of person, I journal in the morning, and then I was recommended to try to see if I could journal at night before going to sleep. So take it out of my head onto the paper to allow my sort of nervous system to say, I'm letting this go for now. I'm shutting my notebook. And I've tried it a couple times, and it genuinely did help a little bit. It's very interesting.
Yeah. Let me add to that. Whether it's PTSD and you're being triggered by the past, or you're a high performer and worrying about the future, I'll have some people write it down. I'll have kids write down their worries, and I'll have them do their breathing, and I'll ask them to slowly tear out these worries. Okay. No one else has to see them. Put your hand over a trash can. You can have 3 trash cans. You can have one that says past. You can have one that says future. And you can let go. You literally let go, not push away, not throw, not crumple, but gently let go of those worries. In your case, you're writing it down. But let me add one more thing about breathing practice. When you're going to do a parasympathetic breathing practice before sleep to shift your physiology, to get your diaphragm to do what it's supposed to do at night, which it may have forgotten, you can do daytime practice. I make a distinction. There's a difference between daytime breathing and before sleep. And what's the difference? I'm certain you're a courageous person with whatever you have the next couple weeks ahead of you. So do your breathing, sit with courage. I got this. You want to be able to be parasympathetic and match those worries, if you will. And it sounds like that's not a big deal for you. But what's different at night? Sleeping in peace is all about letting down your guard. So your worries haven't gotten worse. You're just letting down your guard. And so small things like the electric bill I didn't pay, they can just sit there because you're letting down your guard. And so you gotta, and it's not magic, but that's the process. Courage breathing during the day. And then at night, it's I make distractions okay. So I don't want you to use avoidance during the day. I want you to be courageous. But at night, distraction. So I don't care if you watch a boring documentary on a butterfly in Australia, but not politics, not Mortal Kombat, not
Yeah.
So
Yellowstone Marshals that I watched last night that was frankly not that great.
perfect.
You mentioned
Yeah.
you mentioned one more thing since we're talking about before sleep. You mentioned mitochondrial homework. You mentioned something earlier before going to
Yes,
sleep to do your
mitochondrial
mitochondrial
housekeeping.
housekeeping. What does that mean?
So I know you're a geek when you go to an autonomic conference and you hear a cardiologist speak about what they did to sheep in congestive heart failure, and then you lose sleep. uh, uh, so when people have a congestive heart failure, HIV studies don't always get the big money, but if you're going to come up with a medical device, you can get some big backers. So with people with congestive heart failure, if you pace the heart, through the SA node, technically your HRV is 0 because you're pacing without any diaphragmatic help. And that's the way all pacemakers are currently made. So with this, the Paton studies, Paton, out of New Zealand, they've done 4 or 5 of them, and Shanks in the last 4 or 5 years. They took a pacemaker and they put a probe on the diaphragm and they connected the wiring so that the diaphragm could now be part of it. And I like their term, they're calling it restoring HRV. And so now when you just add a pacemaker with information, they're not pacing the diaphragm, they're just giving information to the pacemaker. After a couple weeks, cardiac output doubles or triples, all these crazy metrics in the sheep and humans. In the sheep, though, I mean, you can't dissect a human's heart, but you can dissect the sheep's heart. They'll look at the mitochondria, and the mitochondria haven't increased in number, but the cristae, the number of folds within each mitochondria, has increased. So just the relationship, the resonance, the rhythmicity between those creates an efficiency that triggers mitochondrial repair. And there's other studies to support this. And so HRV, it's not fully proven, but there's some
evidence
there
There's some indication, yeah.
that it is a metric of your mitochondrial housekeeping. And so when I have chronic fatigue patients, I'll tell them, the metric is so sensitive. I wouldn't worry too much about one night, but it is a metric of your mitochondrial housekeeping.
It's
Very
interesting.
cool.
I want to back up for just a second, Ron, into I think you and I have talked about this. One of the things that got you really focused on HRV was a personal health crisis that you were dealing with that I would describe as burnout. Um, and we see this a lot. We've seen it in athletes, but we see it in professionals as well. And I have many very high performing medical friends, orthopedic surgeons, emergency room doctors, people like this that have they get an Aura ring or they get a device and they wind up throwing it away and I've described to people that right before you die, your HRV is going to be 0. And my Olympians are above 150. So we always want to be working towards Olympians and away from 0. That's always the goal with HRV. And I've got these real high performing medical professionals that are less than 20, some less than 10. And they, you know what? Phenotypically, when you see them, they look great. They seem to be performing well. They seem to have cognitive sharpness. They seem to have all these things. What's going on there?
Well, I could tell you, I was mad as heck about the opioid crisis and what people wanted me to do and so forth. And I could have talked your ear off, but who wants to be around that angry doc? Anybody?
Right.
Anybody want to work with them? Anybody want to live with them? You don't. And when you get admitted to your own hospital with atrial fibrillation, it's when you're like 32, when you shouldn't get it till your 60s or 70s. It's a bit of a wake-up call. So that was my journey. Meditation was a big part of my journey, struggling to get it. And then I found this metric, and then forever this metric. When you can see somebody who's intense and unhealthy and somebody else just sitting there, and they're just both sitting there. And there's got to be a metric, and this is that metric. So I think in those cases, these people are living healthy, they're probably exercising, et cetera, et
Yep.
cetera. They're probably maybe even allocating enough time for sleep, but they may not be. And then so our studies are based on persistent sympathetic activation. And the 21st century has just obliterated our electronic medical records, my phone now. If you paged me when I was a resident, we would tell you, well, call in the morning or go to the emergency department. Now the entire chart is in my phone, thousands and thousands of charts, and the expectation of the quality of answer and the ramifications and the ability to post your disgruntledness on social media. It's the external things that have changed, but you have a metric that's telling you something is wrong, possibly. Now, they could have been injured. They might have had too strong a gut wrench in wrestling and still have a rib out of place, and that affects their HRV. It could be that simple. But it could
Yeah.
also be
Would
you're
it
not.
drive it below 15? Would it drive it down to where your
Yeah, you
RMSSD is?
wouldn't. I can easily say that's not a fantastic sign of whole health.
And if a physician said to you, "You know what? I got this Aura ring. It says my HRV is 15 to 20," and you're sitting there having lunch at a conference, what's your response?
Again, it's incredibly nonspecific. So, depending on how open they are, it's going to be a much longer private conversation, but potentially with a physician patient relationship, because there's so many potential factors. It could be physical and or emotional.
Your description of the fear rumination that can come up. I had a personal example of this with a patient with one of these doctors. And you know what? The patient was telling me that they had a health scare, reached out to the doctor they're working with. These practices wind up being run by physician assistants and nurse practitioners, and but all of a sudden this got escalated up to the prescribing physician. And I'm listening to this description. I'm like, wow, that was a rough conversation for them to have. So it had to be fearful, it had to be stressful. And is that just part of the game at that point?
For the physician,
Yeah.
it's brutal. It's gotten
Uh-huh.
brutal. It's really brutal. The
That's
scrutiny, the expectations, it's brutal being a patient. The health system is broken. It's brutal for both.
yeah.
And I love a lot of healthcare administrators, but there's a lot of them that are looking to improve me.
I like that episode of The Pit when the, healthcare administrator is, lecturing the ER doc on the fact that their scores are below 30%, and this guy's running the most active ER in Pittsburgh, and I'm just like, "Okay, there's a time when you gotta find a different metric." So, talking about
But those metrics have changed for a lot of good,
yes.
but they are also tools, you know? They are knives. They cut people. They cut people for good, and they can cut people for bad.
Yeah. So going back to metrics, something we talk about on the podcast a lot is the 0 to 10, 0 to minus 10, 0 to 10. That I talk about, I'll think about his name here in a minute, Martin Seligman, his acceptance speech, the National Psychiatric Conference. And he says psychologists are really good at helping people go from minus 10 to 0. And he says, why aren't we helping people go from 0 to 10? And I use that metric a lot. And when I attach HRV to this, RMSSD HRV to this, is it fair to say, Ron, that someone with an HRV of 10 to 15 is sitting slightly above 0? They haven't become symptomatic yet, or they're not overtly symptomatic? Or can someone be at 15 and be up at a plus 10 as well?
Question.
Anything's possible. Again, you're not going to get me make a
Yeah.
strong stance of any kind
Listen,
on
I'm
stuff,
willing to use
but
alcohol on this, okay? So just
which
know
will
that.
drop you. But so here's, I think, an advantage I have. I have all my coaching and counseling. It's based on energy principles,
Mm,
allostatic load, and so it is not cognitive behavioral therapy. In my what I published is all about accepting allostasis. Nocturnal HRV and all those physical therapists that do energy conservation, I'm adding to that, trying to create now I have a formula, if you will. Energy management equals energy restoration, that's nocturnal HRV, plus energy modulation, which is heart rate variability biofeedback, plus energy allocation. And those are the decisions that we make of what we're going to put our energy to or let go of. So I can then tell you, which a psychologist might be delicate about telling you, you're having a conflict with your spouse or a coworker, it might be delicate, but I can clearly say if it's unhealthy or not based on an energy principle, not a psychological principle. But you are ruminating, and this could be affecting your HRV. And so I can sometimes take a stronger stance if my paradigm is based on health and energy utilization and not on right or wrong. You didn't come to me for morality, and I'm not trying to cognitively, behaviorally change you. I can find out if you accept that, Don, do you want to change your brother? Good luck. Is that worth your energy? Staying up at night, right? So I can tell you that's not healthy. And I can be very, if I have a good relationship with you, I can be very blunt and tell you that's what you got. It's not healthy,
Yeah.
and it's not helping you recover.
I had a very good friend. He passed away a few years ago. He was a psychologist, and he said, "You have control over one person, and that's the one that's in your shoes." He says, "You have influence over others. The closer you are, the more influence you have. But if they're distant from you, you have very little influence. So just know that you have influence and you have control. So you have control over what you do." And I always thought that. I want to get a point out here that another good friend of mine, Dr. Raouf Gharbo, once told me that you only have stress when you regret the past or fear the future. When you stay present, there is no stress. And I use that term a lot, Ron, for people just to try and get them pulled back. And this is the value of meditation. This is the value of learning to stay. This is that switching process, because that switching is switching from fear or regret back to presence. The other thing that Dr. Garbo taught me one time is you cannot be fearful and grateful at the same time. So if fearfulness is a problem, start functioning grateful. And I think those were two really good statements you made.
We did a study in veterans in South Carolina where we did the biofeedback, the parasympathetic breathing, learning to switch and shift. Is the shift is actually the word I use the most, shifting, and then attaching it to an emotion. I personally have a strong opinion that that emotion is not positive, it's gratitude. And so if I'm dealing with somebody who has metastatic cancer, I'm not going to tell them to be positive. I can't do that. But you potentially could be grateful that your granddaughter's going to come visit you tomorrow. And you can find something to be grateful for if you're paraplegic and so forth. And so if you can attach getting parasympathetic, the physiological shift with, and I make a difference between remembering gratitude and feeling gratitude, if you can connect that. And so then against a sham, they come back 2 months later, we hook them up and we ask them, do what you were taught to do. And so we showed that the skill could be taught over 6 weeks and it was durable for 2 months. The ability to shift your physiology. And if you're in an argument and then suddenly you're grateful that you're actually still in this marriage and that it's not over, that's a better place to have a conversation than, or you're grateful for your job, even if they have unrealistic opioid expectations. You're going to be, the behaviors flow more naturally when you're physiologically in the right place and you're appreciative of something.
I mean, it's the HeartMath Institute did a lot of study on that heart-brain coherence and and
Yes.
the capacity that it allows
Yes.
you to
Yes.
really create a
Yeah, I'm
state.
gonna shape two things.
Yeah.
Seligman, positive psychology, fantastic. Only one thing wrong. Being positive is bias. Optimism is bias. I would say your goal is to become a hopeful skeptic. Still be skeptical that that person or thing could harm you. But you lose hope, suicide's next.
That falls into cynicism at that point.
If you lose skepticism, yes. And
Yeah.
then when it comes to HeartMath, I love HeartMath. We use their devices for that study.
But
There's only one thing I would tweak, that there's no evidence that you can take one emotion and flip it 180 degrees to another. And so you can pick 12 emotions and flip it exactly to another 12. There's no data for that. There is data, and McCratty should get credit, 1995, that gratitude, feeling deep appreciation, that you can connect it to. And so I like Cicero's quote that gratitude is not just the most virtuous of emotions, but it is also the parent, meaning it's the one that can open the door to others. So I look at it as a doorway. And so to propel that meme out there that athletic guys can't go a day without quoting something from Rome, there's your Cicero quote for the day.
That's
You know
funny.
what's interesting how you talk about the psychological shift being an important element of whole body health. Just last episode we talked about how important it is for your physical strength to be flexible, for you to have the balance where when you trip you can fall in any direction. So it seems like that flexibility, that ability to really shift, whether it's from sitting to standing or from side to side, or is to, I don't know, angry to grateful. It's the importance there is what seems to be a bit of a secret for
Nailed it.
serenity and health.
Nailed it. Nailed
Yeah.
it. The other term I want to hear more about is autonomic flexibility.
Yeah.
Persistent sympathetic activation will reduce your cognitive flexibility, your emotional flexibility. And so autonomic flexibility, there's great first beat study on 4,000 Finnish workers who take 0, 1, 2, or 3 drinks before sleep, and how it tanks their ability for their HRV to go down up at night, reducing autonomic flexibility. And thank you for that comment. That's a layup. It's about autonomic flexibility. These two levers, understanding them and being able to move. And then now this part's pure opinion. I think there's an order to getting, so you want to get to cognitive and emotional flexibility. There's an order. You first have to learn how to physically sit still. The next thing is you have to feel physiological stillness, which is getting parasympathetic. So now you're sitting still. Now you can get parasympathetic. Then if you want to control your own thoughts, it's first shifting emotion and feeling grateful for something small, feeling it in your heart. So then that is going to give you emotional flexibility. Now, when you've created that sinusoidal rhythm with heart rate variability biofeedback, it's been shown to improve connectivity from your threat centers to who you are, who you want to be, and where you want to go. So you're improving connectivity, which then allows for creative thinking, poetry, mathematics, etc., where the beautiful creative decision making is. So emotional flexibility, cognitive flexibility, autonomic flexibility, absolutely.
I love that. You know, Ron, what's interesting is we live in a really interesting time right now. Stress, there's always been stress. Okay, it's always been there, but the challenge is that we've magnified our ability to access it many times. You know, listen, when you and I were back in school, we could do stupid stuff and not worry about someone taking a picture of it. Okay, that's a change that's come in recent. There's still people doing stupid stuff. They're just taking pictures of it now. And when I look at this, we have lots of burnout, whether it's professional, whether it's emotional, things like that. I contend that trauma and unresolved traumas are a seed to burnout.
Oh, absolutely.
And I don't believe we're doing a good enough job of recognizing trauma and its impact. Now, it's something we've had to deal with in our family. I believe I've seen it in the athletes I work with. I mean, I can have two athletes that stand there visually look identical, physiologically have very similar physiologies. One has an HRV and the other one has something below 50. And it doesn't take me long to look at the parents of that second athlete to say, okay, there's something going on here. And then having been the parent of an athlete and now watching her coach at the second at the collegiate level, you know, Jacqueline tells me many times she recruits her players' parents. She'll be at a tournament watching something, and she doesn't care how good the girl is if the father is standing on the sideline being an idiot, goes off the list. I'm not
Wow.
recruiting that into my program. So trauma as a seed to burnout. And we talked about this at the beginning of the show, generational trauma. You know, the stuff that your mom had to do, you know, the moving of your father and your mother to a whole new country, and epigenetically that stuff moves. We're starting to understand that. Tell me about is this something that do you believe that, first of all, and secondly, do you look at it in your practice?
It is just having raised 2 daughters, it is unbelievable the pressure and the expectations on young girls it's incomprehensible.
It's not fair.
And then on the other respect, boys might be getting a different message, that it's okay to be aggressive and angry, and demeaning. And that's way better than a tear or two. So the messages and the media and the data, there isn't any question that it is profoundly affecting the brains and the physiology of this generation. I mean, who called my house or knocked at the door at 9:30 at night? It, back then didn't happen. But when they were young, the kids would sneak up into their bedroom with their laptop or whatever. And the whole world of threat and expectation can rain down on them all night. Uh, it's it's impossible parenting as each decade goes by.
So, as a parent, again, I want to separate this out for our listeners. As a parent, is it critical that you recognize your trauma before you can really get a hold of what your child is dealing with?
So let's say, this is what I'll do if I have a patient who's come to see me, and let's say it's she, uh, and she has a 9-year-old and she's married. And what I'll do is I say, you know the movie, Inside Out, I think it is, and the orange guy is the anxious guy.
Mm.
I say, this is what you're going to create. You want to make the adversary between you and your threat response, fear, call it whatever, your orange guy, and that you want to be partnership with the child. You don't want to be adversarial. So you have to first lay out that you too struggle. I'm angry at work because of blank, and I struggle with this. And you too are going to have to learn how to do it. And the way we can do it together, with each of us get our device, we're going to go to our, things are escalate. We're going to go to our corners. We're each going to go get green for 2 minutes. And the kid has the advantage because he hasn't totally extinguished his ability to be parasympathetic. And they could probably get to 2 minutes before you can. So that's fantastic. And then I get that. So now your teammates and the adversary is your sympathetic nervous system. And then also at the end, the first question when you come out is, what are you grateful for? And I guarantee you a kid that's been green for 2 minutes and can answer the question what they're grateful for, they're going to have a massive grin on their face.
Yeah.
Now, there's a different part to this. You have to be fully aligned with your partner. And so you and your partner have to set aside, us Garbos, we don't kick, steal, or cheat. You have to put that on hold, period. Self-regulation, physiological, then emotional, then you can talk to the cognitive concept after. But the husband in that case has got to keep quiet or participate. And this business of lying, stealing, cheating, grabbing, whatever, has got to be a lower priority. And so if you're not aligned, it ain't going to work. So several things have to be, in fact, but that's what I've figured out over time of a methodically stop, shift, and decide.
How
That's awesome.
cool this is. I wish, personal story, I wish my dad would have had those tools. Because a little bit of my trauma stems from, or my people-pleasing thing stems from being home as a child, dad coming home angry, and me being the child making sure dad doesn't stay angry. So everything's fine. So
I wish
he
I had
doesn't
known this
down-regulate
too
it.
and not figured it out until afterwards.
And then you even complicate it more. If you throw the risk of narcissism in,
Oh,
throw the
yes.
risk of this parent who is narcissistic, not of their own desire or demand, but because of something that happened in their childhood,
Yeah,
a
personal
significant
trauma.
trauma that leads to this narcissism. They can't even reflect. Okay, so listen, that's a whole.
That's
We don't have time to go down that rabbit hole, but what we do have time for is the speed round. This is the first time we've ever done this, Ron.
let's do it.
So we're doing the speed round. I've got 10 elements here I want to go over, and I want you to score them 0 to 10. They can all be 10s. They can all be 0s. Okay. So there's, the rules are wide open.
10,
As
I
to-
agree.
Okay.
Is
Then
10, I agree? or what?
10, you agree, yes, it's very important. 0 is, don't really think about it. Okay.
Okay.
So, and we're talking about what does it take if I want to improve my HRV? I see this metric. I want to do better. Here are 10 things. I want you to rate them as to what's really good. Okay. Number 1, quality of sleep, 7 to 9 hours, consistent schedule,
10 plus.
10 plus. Intentional stress practices, breathing, mindfulness work, things like that.
Yeah, 9.
Aerobic exercise.
Activity, 10.
Okay, because the next one is strength training
Okay.
because the research is starting to separate the two.
Yes, it is. So I'm not gonna be able to answer. With my patients who have POTS or static, it would be recumbent aerobic program is the goal. And with my patients who go anaerobic early, the chronic fatigue patients, it may be brief floor-based exercises with brief resistance. I'll put them together, the individualized activity program, because here's what you can't escape. Sorry, I'm slowing you down. What you can't escape is that
This is the speed round, Ron.
rhythmic exercise creates shearing, which, if you're not overwhelmed with inflammation, sparks repair.
Okay, so let me go to the next one. Recovery optimization, which can include avoiding overtraining to use of sauna, perhaps, using recovery modalities, red light, PEMF, things like that.
Sure, 5.
Okay. Nutrition, hydration.
Requisite, 10.
Okay. 10 plus. Consistent daily schedule, doing your best to stay consistent on a daily basis.
Moderation in everything, even moderation.
Okay. Nasal or slow paced breathing, 4 to 6 breaths a minute.
You have to have the skill after you have to have the habit, then the skill requisite. After you've reached a certain level, you may not have to have a habit.
So addressing underlying health factors, that if you've got this number, you go see a doctor, listen, you've got to get on top of that, right?
Yeah, you have to be health conscious.
Yeah. And finally, the 10th, actually monitoring data, because there's so much of this monitoring that can create its own stress response. And we're hearing a lot about this, that I'm almost to the point that I want a wearable that I can only see the data the week ago data or a month ago data.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for this one. Right now, what has happened is the companies have the power. At some point, I get the power, and I see you going down rabbit holes, and I'm going to blind you from tons of it and just have you check HRV. And if you are ruminating, if you can't follow the 10-second rule, the 2-minute rule, we just turn it off. Or, or if you've gone past it and you're independent, these are training wheels. And so you don't have to have training wheels if you're succeeding in every aspect of your life.
Interesting. They're guardrails training. I love that. So, what's interesting, I was just reading a paper this week on HRV coefficient of variance. And it's another statistical piece that one of the manufacturers is putting in as to its relationship to longevity. And what's so difficult about this is that you're right, that the manufacturers or the companies have the power right now. And I think the next generation of this technology starts to look at what we just discussed. How do we put this into a form? You know what? I've talked for a long time. I want a screen that comes up and all there is a big green arrow, a big red arrow, or a yellow, one or the other. Just if it says green, good. You close it off, you keep going. Simplifying it. And, you and I can have a conversation about RMSSD and SDNN and LF and HF and so forth, but the rest of the world doesn't think in those terms.
It's a mess, but it's awesome. It's gonna, once the Wild West gets some structure, things are codifying as we speak. But yeah, when I tell somebody to get a wearable device and they say, well, my doctor said that the data is junk, and I tell them, you tell your doctor they're 90% correct, but there is some gold here that if you want to work together and figure it out, this gold can change the health.
I love that response. I love that response.
Really good.
And it's getting better all the time. I mean, the data is improving fast.
Yep.
And as long as you're comparing your data on the ring to the ring, or the data on your Whoop to the Whoop, not
Yes,
one to another, that's how you can track well.
exactly. I tell them, this is exactly what I tell them. I say, look, this is your device. You're going to compare yourself. I know you're going to come back and ask me if this number is good or not. It doesn't matter. This is your baseline. So you never are going to compare to anybody else or any other device. If you compare to yourself, it's still science. It's not science. Anything else beyond that.
Ron Garbo, Dr. Raouf Gharbo, my friend, we've been trying to get this done. I was looking at our text string. We're working on about 6 months right now, but we got it done. We got it in the can. My friend, I really appreciate it. And I don't know when I don't know what wrestling match we're going to see each other at next, but I can't wait.
I'll be in Cleveland 2 weeks.
You
Or
know,
3
and
weeks.
I haven't decided if I'm going to go or not. That was the last place. When last time I was at Nationals at Cleveland, I was there with my brother. So every time I think about it, I'm just like, I don't know if I'll be
Yeah.
there or not, but we'll see.
It was wonderful to meet you, Klaudia.
It was so nice to meet you. I'm so glad we were able to make this happen. Where can people find out more about you? Where's your work?
The only social media, again, to put some
LinkedIn?
limits, the only social media I do is LinkedIn. People
Yeah.
are welcome to connect. I do post things that will simplify an article here and there, and I'll put it under hashtag Autonomic Rehabilitation. Those are the two things that I do sporadically, and
Cool.
loosely.
Sweet.
There's only
Well,
two doctors I know on the face of the earth that do autonomic rehabilitation. You and Justin McGuire down in South Africa, who has a book coming out that I was just exchanging. So you are a leader. Keep up the good work. The world is better off because you're doing what you're doing. So thank you.
thank you.
Thank you. Very
And for the
kind.
listener, follow, subscribe, like, send us a comment, send us questions, and stay tuned because we have a lot of guests coming up soon.
And hopefully you like what we're talking about.
Oh,
See you, everybody. See you, Klaudia. See you, Ron.
see ya.